How has your life changed by having 2 kids with epilepsy?
Well, it's very different because we discovered Luke's epilepsy when he was 2. He had a grand mal seizure in the back seat of my car, and we rushed him by ambulance to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, where he proceeded to have 2 more grand mal seizures in the triage room. So he was admitted and taken through a battery of tests for 3 days. And they could not find anything wrong with him. He didn't have a temperature. He didn't have any deficiencies. He was hydrated. He didn't have any electrolyte problems. And all of his x-rays and his MRIs all came back normal. And so they diagnosed him as having idiopathic epilepsy, which means unexplained seizure disorder. So that completely changed my life because all of a sudden now I had a 2-year-old who was having grand mal seizures with no explanation. And the doctors had said that when you have a grand mal seizure, if they don't come out of that seizing state for a little more than a few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, they could have permanent brain damage. So in the back of my mind, not knowing what caused the seizures, and that if he had another one, we only had 10 or 15 minutes to get him to stop seizing, or he could have permanent brain damage, it made me never want to leave his side. So I was afraid that in the middle of the night he would have a seizure and I wouldn't know. So I actually slept in his room. I didn't want him to know it. So I didn't want him to depend on me sleeping there or know that I was so scared for him. So I would let him fall asleep, and then when he was sound asleep, I would sneak into his room and either sleep on the floor or in the corner of his bed and stay there all night with him. And I literally did that for several years. And then, if he went to
How old do you think he was, till you stopped doing that?
About 6. And then, if he got invited to a birthday party that was a swim party, I went and stayed with him. I didn't just drop him off. I mean, even when he was, 8, 9 years old, I still stayed at the party because I was afraid if there was only 2 parents watching 30 kids swimming, what if he had a seizure when he was in that pool? They would never get to him. So it was very life-changing. And then the fact that he was heavily medicated on a anti-seizure medicine called phenobarbital. And it completely changed his personality. And I was he was my first child. So you always hear about the terrible 2. So when his behavior was just, he was bouncing off the walls, I really didn't know if it was because he was a 2-year-old and that was typical behavior, or if it was because of the medication. And so I made an appointment with a new child neurologist and met with her, and she got all the records and we talked about it. And I said, is this normal behavior for a 2-year-old? And she said, absolutely not. This is the drug doing this to him. And I said, well, since we can't recreate what caused his seizure or have any brain activity that shows he's going to have a seizure, how do we know he's going to have another one? And she said, we don't. And I said, so then why is he on this medicine? They said, well, we don't want him to have another one. I said, well, what would be the worst thing if we took him off the medicine? She said, well, you would re-experience that same day again. He would have seizures and you'd have to rush him to the hospital. And I said, you know what? I would rather not medicate him when he doesn't have to be, since we don't know what caused the seizure. And I know I survived that day once, and I could survive it again. So we decided to take him off the medicine. And you have to, it's called weaning. They have to do little by little. So it took us 4 months to get him off the medicine. And that was when he was just shy of his 3rd birthday. And knock on wood, 16 years later, he has never had a seizure. But after I weaned him off of that medicine, that worried me that I made the wrong decision. And I was constantly fearful that he would have another seizure and it would be my fault because I took him off the medicine. Luckily, he has not.
So, like,
and then
what
with
about my experience? Yeah.
Your experience is completely different because you had epilepsy. We don't even know when your epilepsy started.
I had to have been born with it because it had to.
You weren't necessarily born with it. You have a temporal lobe epilepsy, so you actually have an explanation as to what type of epilepsy you have. And yours did show up in your EEG, which was your brainwave test. We saw the spikes in it. And so your MRIs and all of your testing have come back that there's no brain abnormalities that's causing the epilepsy. So we don't know why you have temporal lobe epilepsy, but we do know that that could be caused by any type of injury. And although you don't have any damage to your brain, you did fall when you were about 2 years old. You fell on a sidewalk and you did injure the front of your head, which is where your temporal lobe of your brain is. So it's possible that something happened when you fell. And, you know, if you think about it, when you were little, you didn't know if you had deja vu, you didn't really realize that as a 2 or a 3-year-old. And when you were, 6 or 7 and you would come to mom and dad and say, oh, I feel like I've been here already, we would just say, well, oh, that's something called deja vu. It does. It happens to everyone. And it didn't happen frequently to you, maybe only once a year, which that's normal. So we never thought about it. It wasn't.
First time it happened, I was at grandma's house. I was like 6. Or was I younger?
Yeah, it probably was about 6. You were probably about 6 was the first time you
I remember
having
that was the very first time I observed it for myself. Yeah.
Yes. Didn't happen often. And we didn't think anything of it until you start having it right before you started freshman year. And you all of a sudden in 1 week had like a deja vu episode every single day.
I would have like 3 a day.
And then mom asked you to Google, what causes deja vu? And that's when we realized on Google that you possibly could have epilepsy as well. And so we immediately made an appointment with the neurologist. And so how it's changed your life is because you're older, and you are much more active, and there is no outgrowing your type of epilepsy, and there's no cure to it, and it's just something that you are going to have to live with for the rest of your life. And, as you know, it's changed our lives in that, with driving, we have to be cautious, and there are rules and regulations around having seizures and driving, and we had to wait 6 months before we can get your driver's permit because of the seizures. And you are on, your anti-seizure medicine and your anti-anxiety medicine, and they make you very sleepy. And so, just as it changes my life, I have to be more careful with you. Every night, what do I text you? Did you take your pills? I have to remember to remind you. I could be laying in bed, and then at 1 o'clock in the morning, I think, did Katie take her pills? And I can't sleep. I literally cannot sleep. I have to go up in your room and look into your container and make sure that you took the pills, or I can't sleep at night. And so it's little things like that, and it's being hard on you sometimes. I know sometimes you don't get to do things you want to because I'm worried about it with the seizures, and we just have to be a little more careful. And I know you sleep you have to have a minimum of 9 to 10 hours a night of sleep.
I'm like a sleepy person as it is, so the medicine only makes it worse.
Yes, and so that interferes. You're a young teenage girl with a lot of activities, and I know on weekends you'd like to go on sleepovers a lot of time, but what do? You sleep. You stay home. You say, no, Mom, I want to just sleep, and you sleep till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's because of the medicine. So, there's, as I always say to you, there are many crosses that we could bear that would be a lot worse, but this is your cross to bear, and, it is life-changing.
So, because Luke and I have epilepsy, It very much like changes our worlds, but it very much changes yours and Dad's as well, just because you guys are so worried about us. So how has Luke and I having epilepsy, like how has that like changed your perspective on life, like how short life is and how it can change in a second?
You know, to me, I always feel that no one has a perfect life. And everyone, like I just said, has a cross to bear. No one doesn't have any problems. Everyone has problems. And I think it makes me more aware of other problems, other people's problems. Because I know, I'm not at all happy that you both have it, but I'm grateful that Luke doesn't have grand mal seizures every day, and that you don't have grand mal seizures at all, that you have these tiny little small focal seizures that don't even really interrupt your day. You get a stomach ache and a headache, and it's not fun, but it's not disruptive of your life overall. And when you think about these kids that have epilepsy or other diseases where they have seizures every 5 minutes, they could have 30 seizures a day every day, and they can't function. It literally... It makes me grateful that this is all that you have, that it could be so much worse. And it makes me aware that there are so many people that do have it so much worse than you. And, I pray for those people. I pray for those families and for those parents, because I know how hard it is on me. And, this is very, very manageable. Your disease is very manageable. And so it makes me more aware of people that don't have manageable diseases and just how hard that must be.
Are you, I know that, like, do you feel the need to spread more awareness about it and, like finding help? I know that epilepsy, it's very, like, common. There's more than 200,000 cases of it per year, so it's not like there hasn't, been a lot found out about it. But, like, do you feel, I'm obviously in my Genius Hour project spreading more awareness about epilepsy and just other people's stories, just because your epilepsy experiences like change as you get older.
They do, and there's so many different types of epilepsy.
Yeah.
There are epilepsies that could get worse as time goes on, that require surgery. There are some epilepsies, such as your brother, that you can outgrow, and you no longer are diagnosed with epilepsy. That, it was a childhood thing. And, Uncle Michael also outgrew his epilepsy. He was on the same medication, phenobarbital, that your brother was on. But their types of epilepsy, whatever it was, they were able to outgrow it, where yours, you don't outgrow temporal lobe epilepsy. But yeah, there is a lot of awareness out there, but I think it's always helpful to talk about it and spread your experiences as much as possible. One of my dear friends has another friend whose 15-year-old daughter was just diagnosed with epilepsy, and they didn't know anything about it. And so Lisa, in having deal with me and know all about what we've been doing with you for the past year, she offers her help and, has connected us. And, it's just always helpful when you know someone who has gone through it.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any like final thoughts or anything that you would like to wrap up with? Just like about like my project and what I'm doing, and, like why you think it's important that I've decided to do this project and stuff.
I think it's important because I think you have a great attitude about it. You could be depressed, you could be sad, you could cry, and maybe sometimes you do when you're alone, because you do have this and that something's wrong and it's life-changing, and it's something that you're just going to deal with for the rest of your life, but you have a very positive outlook and you don't let it get you down. And you just realize that, when you're tired, you can't do sleepovers. When there are parties after party after party, that you sometimes can't accept all the invitations, and you need to just be able to sleep a little. And I think you're realizing that you've got some limitations now, and I think you deal with them very well. And I really like this project and what you're doing here, because I think you can help other people. Some people may be depressed that they have epilepsy. They might feel sorry for themselves. They might not think in the way we do that, it could be a whole lot worse. And I think you could be very beneficial to those people and just talking to them about how you deal with it every day and how you still have a positive attitude. And that, you know, if you think about it and you do get depressed and you miss out on an activity because of your epilepsy, how you deal with that and how you remain positive and how you move beyond that. And I think it's really important that you can share those experiences with others.